to be successful, you have to have a general curiosity about it. You can't just get into the field saying, okay, I'm going to make a ton of money. It's like, you've got to like have that inquisitive nature about you. You know, you want to lean into something that, you know, sparks that interest, you know, so because that's going to be a driving force throughout your career. You're always going to be learning. Like the space, the industry, forever changing. My mentor, Sarah Bartlett, I think she used the analogy from like Alice in Wonderland, like the data spaces. It's such that you need to run as fast as you can to stay in the same place.
Wow.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you don't necessarily have to have a computer science degree to, you know, work in data. Like the vast majority of people, like you see, come from all walks of, you know, life, you know, finance, procurement, supply chains. I feel like, you know, to your point, you know, everyone has a different vantage point, right? You know, diverse thinking. So I think the more breadth we have, the richer the insights we get.
Initially, I saw myself as a analyst, data analyst.
Yeah.
But I think the most important skill is more how you actually think. I'm not an analyst, a data analyst. I am a problem solver.
Yeah, I love that.
solve
Love
problems.
That.
That's just what I do.
Huge. That's what it is.
You said to me that it doesn't matter about what tool that you use. The most important thing is having a flexibility to use whichever tool, because they all have their different strengths, but most importantly, knowing what you want to do. And from there, you can always reverse engineer. I'm well aware that you've got a great circle of close friends, and I know them. They're my friends too,
as well,
and you know, people that I grew up with. Everyone. The Brotherhood. You strike me as someone who wears your heart on your sleeve. What you see is what you get. You love hard, but you also feel.
Yeah.
You've had some good days. You've had some dark days.
Yeah.
How has that Brotherhood as a mentorship group?
That's a deep one, man.
I know.
That's a deep one. Like, as in, it's that shared story, right? You know, like it's way easier to go further together than it is alone. And there is that sort of, not to say that you use your friends as barometers to sort of gauge how well you're doing, but you uplift each other as well, right? You know, there is that kind of like, this is the standard we hold ourselves to.
Because ultimately, this journey that you're on, that we're walking, not everyone can walk it.
Yeah.
So it's actually really quite lonely. And
it is.
Very few people will understand it
Many
too.
are called, few are chosen.
Amen. Guys, welcome back to the channel, and I'm going to have another discussion today, and I'm joined by another specialist within the technology sector. In actual fact, I'm joined by someone who is a dear friend to me, who started his journey in South London, attending school in Wimbledon College.
You know that.
Then essentially he went to running in his red and black Herne Hill vest, which is where we became good friends. He then took life to a whole nother level when he went out to the States on a scholarship as an NCAA Div 1 student athlete. Then his journey took him to being someone working for some of the biggest brands in the world, such as Samsung and Tropicana, just to mention a few. But let me leave this man himself to introduce himself. Shola Olojo, welcome, my friend.
What an introduction. I really appreciate that introduction, Julian. And it means a lot to be here. It really does mean a lot to be here. So yeah, my name is Shola Olojo. I'm Nigerian. Moved to the UK when I was young. You know, been living here ever since. Like you mentioned, I was fortunate enough to actually earn a scholarship to attend the University of Memphis, which was such a transformative period of my life. You know, I was, you know, major life milestones there. You know, graduating with an economics degree, which sort of catapulted me into this sort of world of data and tech. And I've sort of, you know, I've made, you know, such a great network of, you know, close friends that I can sort of tap into. Outside of like just a professional circle, just like people I can sort of lean on during sort of challenging moments and get some advice on. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a wonderful journey. And again, just hearing you sort of map out that, you know, track, data, the corporate set, it's been, yeah, phenomenal. And I'm sort of glad to be a part of that for sure.
Now, I know there's lots that you want to discuss, but there's one question that I want to just pick out right now. The corporate world is a highly pressurized environment. But for those that don't know, being a student athlete in the Div 1 is also a highly pressurized environment where the need to perform week in, week out is a necessity to maintain your status within the team and probably your scholarship. So my question is, how transferable or how important was that pressure cooker of that cauldron of the NCAAs? Do you think that played a part in why you've become a leader within the data space?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you codified it really well. Like it's high pressure, and you know you do have your sort of like preconceived notion of what like collegiate sport is going to be like, but it's completely different until you're in that seat, you know. But yeah, like in terms of being a student athlete, you know, sometimes we'd have weights 6 a.m. in the morning, and then you know we'd get our session done straight into class. You know, you've got to have the dexterity to be able to, you know, juggle your athletic commitments with your student obligations as well, right? So in terms of transferable skills, I think it's, you know, I like hand in hand, like in terms of just being disciplined, having grit as well. I think that's such a understated attribute. You know, like you've been there. You know, go through, you know, competitions that haven't gone well, like for like, some projects at work won't go well, right? You know, you've got to have the sort of mental fortitude to kind of like persevere through tough moments, and I think athletics really instilled like just core values in me that like I seamlessly just flow through life with it now, right? You know, it's not something maybe when I was younger I had to like sort of think about it, but now, you know, being a bit more mature, it just kind of evolves and it changes as well, right? You know, I think you've seen how like the sports, you know, can throw you like curveballs, you know, you're injured and whatnot. Similarly, like, you know, we've just, you know, been in a situation where like a client may have pulled out, you know, and you were having to, you know, strategically work in the background to kind of like mitigate any sort of challenges, and, you know, you're doing your rehab. It's, yeah, again, parallels between kind of like sports and the corporate world for sure, you know, and you're just, yeah, like you've got just an edge, you know, and everyone else as well, you know. So yeah, I think it's like incredibly pertinent for sure in my journey.
Ah, amazing.
Yeah.
So this kind of feeds into something else that I wanted to ask you, I guess, is data in sports. Now, we know in America, sports analytics has been huge. We're starting to see that transfer over into UK sport, and I think the reason for that is because there's a lot more American franchise owners coming over to United Kingdom. If we look at Chelsea, Todd Bowley, who is the owners of the Dodgers in America, is now obviously the Chelsea owner and now wanted to build out a whole data department, right? But I want to know, is it impactful or is it just noise? And I say that because if we take metrics that I hear about a lot nowadays, like expected goals or how many touches someone's had on the heat map, we know that a lot of clubs are essentially aligning these key metrics to how a team sets up in terms of their tactics. But when that player comes through the door, maybe it's not quite materializing the way that they thought. If we, you know, look at players like maybe Rasmus Højlund in terms of his goals ratio at Manchester United, they probably expected a little bit more. But that's not a criticism of the player or the club. Is it noise? What is it?
I think there's a bit of both. I think, you know, we are in a very unique position where like there's been such a huge like boom in data, you know, and it is quite noisy out there, you know. And I think the conversation we had before this is individuals who are able to sort of quell that noise and, you know, pick out insights that are specific to like an industry and organizations. Those are your key players. Those are your rock star. So in terms of sports and data, we run the risk of, you know, a common like issue is correlation doesn't necessarily equate to causality, right?
Yes.
So there might be instances where like two seemingly distinct data points might be showing you know, a positive correlation, but one might not be directly contributing towards the other. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think in certain spaces that can lead to really bad decision making, like in terms of football, for example. Let's just take an example of like, AI is an algorithm, right? We talked about that.
Sure.
So it's being fed, historical data, and it's like pattern recognition, but at like a super scale, right? So if you were to feed information about said footballer, and there was a certain pattern recognition, and it just keeps on kind of like churning the same output, doubling down, amplifying it. But that output is being tainted by some kind of bias that will then lead to, again, like I said, bad decision making, inconclusive results, but then like lots of money being sort of wasted down the line, right? Because that's not the ROI that you would sort of want on the back of something like that as well. So that's not really answering your question, is it?
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
For sure,
I look at Sky Sports, right? I look at Sky Sports News and stuff, and before, all of the pundits used to be people who played the game. So I absolutely love listening to people like Roy Keane. I think he's very direct and very honest. Credit to all the other people who are now on the panel. There are a lot of YouTubers. And when they talk a lot about statistics. And I think to myself, in the context of things, does it really mean anything? Like I heard the other day, the former Burnley manager, Sean Dyche, criticize Vincent Kompany or say, how did he get that job? Because his win ratio at Burnley wasn't very good in the Premier League. Yes, I agree with that. But what about the context, the fact that maybe he's a leader, maybe he's an excellent communicator with players, maybe his ideas on the training ground are invigorating. Do you see what I mean? So you cannot, it's not literally a black and white, these are what the statistics say, so this must be true. Which is what I think is we're seeing a lot of in particularly UK sport, and almost damaging, I think, football to a certain extent. And again, this is not a criticism of any of the staff or the clubs, but do we need to just pause, take a big breath and think about actually, why do we really need this here? Because when I previously led departments in football, I understand the need to manage our workload of players. I get why we use GPS tracking. But I'm not too sure in terms of commentary, I'm not too sure in terms of recruitment if it's there yet. But you've been in the NCAAs, you've been in where sports is, analytics is gold standard. What's your thoughts?
I think coming back to that point, I think it's like making a distinction between being data driven and data informed, right? I think there's a huge
and there is a difference.
Yeah, there is. I think being data driven, a lot of organizations, it's a massive buzzword. We want to be we're data driven, data led, but you might be getting led down the wrong path, right? I think certainly there is that human oversight. That crucial sort of context and anecdotal feedback that is sometimes sort of lost when we're going through just a conventional sort of data strategy, data storytelling sort of component. And I think once that sort of human input is used in conjunction with the data, so it's not, the data is not the beauty, it's not a Swiss Army knife, right? It's human data stories. That's literally what we're telling, right? It's a tool, a vehicle towards making, decisions that are going to be pertinent towards like your organization and your business. So you need that sort of like real world human context as well. I think sometimes it's missing, So I go on.
So what? So I just wanted to say. So it does, in terms of the UK, so we're seeing I think I've seen recently Tottenham Hotspur wanting to hire a data analyst. Does for sports analytics to be effective here, how it is in America, do we need to see more experts within the actual data field like yourself coming in and overseeing those kind of departments and what they're doing, as opposed to people who are sports scientists or performance analysts who are now kind of transferring over more into that space.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's interesting because, like, I think we've talked about. Oh, excuse me. We've talked about breaking into sort of data, right? There isn't a conventional route. You don't necessarily have to have a computer science degree to work in data. Like the vast majority of people, like you see, come from all walks of life. Finance, procurement, supply chains. I feel like to your point. Everyone has a not USP, but they've got a different vantage point, right? Diverse thinking. So I think the more breadth we have, the richer the insights we get in terms of like sports and analytics. I think the big challenge I've seen is trying to move towards, I think we touched on it, the predictive element. Like if you think about, so I like to use like a 4-step like framework for codifying like sort of data and storytelling. The team at actually Storytelling with Data, Cole and her team do this really well. I think in most organization we have the descriptive and diagnostic. So the data telling us descriptive what's happening. Diagnostic is then going a step further and telling us why something's happening, right? So there is that sort of first two pillars. Not many organizations sort of move past that, right? It's quite cyclical. You're kind of stuck there. I think the next layer on that is, the predictive element, right? So it's like we know what's happened. We know why something's happened. We have a better idea of what's going to happen next now, right? Predictive. Okay. Right, and then the final piece is prescriptive, right? So that sort of stage, right? So what's happened, why something's happened, what's going to happen next, and what are we going to do about it, right? So I think in the context of sports, having that sort of like framework and not like blindly, churning out data for data's sake, is attaching it to a desired outcome with the intention to kind of like prescribe a strategy to help football clubs recruit better players, keep their players healthy, like improve their tenure, and really sort of like capitalize on like the core sort of principles to make your football club or sports program successful. I think having an understanding of that will really, really help that sort of conversation there.
Wow.
What are your thoughts?
Now that's kind of made me shift my focus to data science, because you literally just spoke about it then, in that predictive element.
Yeah.
I actually did my master's thesis in trying to predict sports injuries in professional football players. So I essentially had data for a season for a club in League One here, and I used support vector machine models and random forests were my two machine learning algorithms that I used in order to answer some key questions. Firstly, can we use machine learning to predict sports injuries? Can we use it to distinguish between different type of injuries? And also, can we identify key features which might predict injury? The results that I got were encouraging. Okay. Accuracy of 95% and above, which was good. But I still had questions regarding the contextual element, and therefore would be very hesitant to use this as my point of reference when having conversations with the management team. So I say that because, and we spoke about this before, is let's say that in that season, the club had a certain manager. In fact, in that season, the club had 2 or 3 different managers. Completely different styles of football, different, therefore, demands of the body. So if we now label some players as more likely to be injured, this one robust. Next season, new manager comes in, new environment, new tactics. To be honest with you, all the research I've just done on that player, you could say is not that impactful. Do you see?
No.
So,
I wouldn't. Yeah.
So this is where I'm looking at data science going, actually, everyone wants to do it right now because it sounds sexy. Well, we're using machine learning, we're doing predictive algorithms. But is it that impactful? And then in my time in another company, in another organization, completely different sector, not in sport now, but in more like the gaming, gambling industry, you're working on that model. I've sort of data scientists working on that model for like well over 6 months, and it's still not been put into production. So we have to have the question, this is great because it's new, it's innovative, we all like the new hype, but is it really making any impact on businesses? That's my...
I think, really, really good point. I think you said, some really good point. I think you need to consider where like the business is in like sort of their data sort of life cycle, a really mature business. Like I've worked with some organizations and they, like I said, a lot of their stuff is housed in like Excel and PDF files, and some organizations have really, really complex, Python scripts that are like, generating, insane like predictive models. We actually use predictive models in our sort of organization right now as a planner. So I work as a strategic planner for our field marketing agency, and how we use predictive models is determining where to visit, where to allocate resources, right? So it's a case of like training the model on like historical sales data. So we look at things like, seasonality, like you sort of mentioned, seasonality, trend, we can throw things like, footfall, so like, footfall in there, visits, compliance. And essentially what that does is spits out a recommendation or suggestion that we can then, take back to the business and say, hey, based on what we've sort of inputted into this model, this is a viable option, and you can lay like 3 or 4 different like scenarios down there. I think it's useful only if it ties back to the business, right? I think that without the commercial element, like we can build whatever we want, right? But if it's not telling like the football coaches how to like reduce spend, how to increase profits, how to maximize ROI, then ineffectively it's like not useless, but it's it's not a viable product in that sense. So I think definitely relating it back to a business use cases is key in that for sure.
See, this is my point, and I'm glad you said that. It's how much value is it really adding? So in your case of how you're using it, and some great examples, some use cases there, from start to production, how long was this process?
A while. But I think it's almost
3 months, 6 months.
No. It really does depend. Like I think, like we have a guy on our team he's just built like an intervention return model. Okay. It's taken him a month to do that, right? And that model essentially what it does is, so if you think about Tropicana, for example, like we have like field agents, going into stores and merchandising and so on, just to ensure that products are like right shelf positioning, they've got enough like sort of stock and things of that nature. What the model does is give us a lens into what's happening on the shop floor, right? So what intervention is driving the biggest return, right? So we can then, not only that, it takes it a step further. We look at individual SKUs as well, right? So certain interventions overlaid with, a certain type of SKU. So if we know that the kind of like, I don't know, I'm quoting stuff now, like naked blue, I don't know, energy, right? It's selling really well, but it's on the back of a field agent going to stores and doing like a stock ordered on that particular SKU, and that's driving a huge uplift. That's your moneymaker, right? That's where we're gonna, try to, push the team to kind of and advocate for them to do more of. Conversely, if we know that, if they are, I don't know, like placing like pause and that's like taking up most of their time, but it's not really generating much of an uplift, we're going to deter them from doing it, or like spend a bit less time doing that as well. So I think that took a while to build. Like that took a while to build, but the return on the back of that. So again, it's almost like weighing weighing it up. So we're automating. So it takes us way less time to kind of like run. Like once the script is built, just puts the sales data in there, spits out an output. We're able to sort of churn out outputs really, really quickly. And then in turn, that automation allows us to be a bit more efficient, allows us to spend more time doing the insights, the yellow stuff, the strategy, the planning.
Yeah.
And in turn, that sort of allows us to, generate more value. And then,
I appreciate
does that make sense?
No, I appreciate what you're saying, but you're a man that did explosive sport, right? You are a triple jumper. You did 60 meters and 100 meters.
Yeah.
You have just described to me a process which is Mo Farah and Paula Ratcliffe. That's a very long time. The business environment is agile. You know that. We have to make decisions quickly.
Yeah. It
so
does, yeah.
with what you just said, credit to you, but this is an example where I'm going, we don't always have time.
Yeah. I think, no. Again, it's almost like weighing it up, right? And again, if the output on the back of that isn't like conducive, like you can spend time building a model and it like completely falls over, right? Or no one uses it. And like, in which case you've sort of lost like time, like resource and so on. So I think it's, definitely case by case, So I certainly think companies need to do the basics better, right? And when I mean the basics, it's like just have like a solid infrastructure in place, like ensure like the data being fed in is clean, right? They don't even do that. Right, they just assume, okay, we get everything into like a lake and chuck it into the model, we'll figure it out. No, it's like, bad data in, like bad data out.
Correct.
Right, so I think for me, it's a case of, just doing the basics well, getting good ground and good foundation, and then you can start to like, you can move it. Again, like we did explosive disciplines, like there are times we need to move at pace. There are times we need to be a bit more deliberate, right? More purposeful in how we're choosing to kind of like deploy our resources and leverage, insights and data and our power. So I think it's a combination of both, knowing when to flex it.
You have been skimming on a topic there. You've been tiptoeing. So I don't know about you, but I can't swim properly anyway. So
I joke and say I'm negatively buoyant.
The only way
I jump in, I start sinking.
The only way I'm swimming is plunge pool, or maybe pina colada by the pool, and I'm flexing, floats. Right?
Nah, man.
So, but you have just led me on to my next question there. Tech stack.
Good.
So,
good point. Yeah.
For me,
what's your current tech stack?
I don't really like Microsoft Azure. That's for sure. It's clunky. Yeah, it's hot. It's slow.
Like, it's cheap though.
I guess
if it's like, and then like again, go on.
Snowflake, first class.
Yeah.
Big high volume data, millions of rows of transactions.
For sure. Yeah. Pay for what you need.
20, 30 seconds, under a minute, done. Voila. Obviously Power BI, it very much integrated into many
stack,
different into the stack, and just in general very easy to work with.
I don't know, Tableau. I'm just kidding. Go on. For sure.
I'm now a fan of Click, or been using Click. I feel like this is very much based on like a developer's tool. You can do everything that you want to do with it. Very powerful reporting tool for people that don't know what this is. But essentially, it's how we make data look sexy, how we make it look, nice and fancy. Click, Tableau, Power BI. But Click is a really good tool. But it's like a developer tool. It's clunky. And then Microsoft Teams is the feel of it, the interface is not as smooth as using Slack.
So they're trying. I get it.
But what I have seen in all the organizations that I've worked in, even myself, is the industry is moving so fast. Is how do we define what governs what stack we should use? So that's my question to you, is you being a strategist, what has been the KPIs that you like that goes, this is what we're going to make our decision by?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I don't oversee like enterprise. Okay. Let me sort of frame that up a little bit. Yeah. So I've worked with like sort of Peer Power, and they do we do some infrastructure stuff. I think for me, again, it goes back to where the organization is in terms of their like life cycle, right? Budget is a big one. You know, what can they afford? I'm not going to recommend, you know, like the most comprehensive AWS system for a small nonprofit that's, you know.
We're not going to recommend anyone unless you pay us.
I'm sorry, let's stop that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
No fee.
Yeah. No fee. Exactly.
No can do.
So I think accessibility as well, right? You know, so I'm very much like, is it data? Allowing data to be democratized.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
So having the big challenge is teams working in silos, right? You know, you have one team working on this, you know, another team sort of doing this, and we know. So I think it's a case of trying to figure out a stack that integrates different like departments, you know, creating a single source of the truth. And allows you to scale as well, you know, scalability, you know. I think those components is something I'll sort of look at if I'm sort of coming in.
What about your employees' skill level? Like I'm seeing
data
now,
literacy, huge. That's another one as well. Data literacy.
I'm seeing people or roles I didn't think needed to use data saying, oh, I'm starting to learn SQL now, and I'm going, what?
It's so, like not so much like see, but yeah, absolutely. I think data literacy is a big one as well, right? Like ingraining a cohesive data culture in the organization, like super important. You know, so much so that our HR team, you know, they're well versed in Power BI, right? You've got. I think you just need to have an understanding of data and how to ascertain insights on the back of that. Because again, you know, these are where, you know, key decisions are made, you know, and, you know, something that sort of accelerated that is AI, right? So the barriers of entry to like learning about data is like, it's gone down a little bit now, you know, like it helps things like, you know, coding, you know, I'm able to kind of like, so I dabble a bit of Python. I wouldn't say I'm the best coder, but there are areas where I've used, you know, AI to help me fill in some gaps, right? I know we're sort of jumping off topic here, but I'm just saying like, so data literacy, accessibility, trying to break up those silos, like things like sort of budget, and ultimately like a way to kind of like upskill your team so they are kind of like aware of, you know, the tools at their disposal, but also how to interact with it as well, you know. The last thing, and again, it's just something I see time and time again, it's like, you know, we have companies like huge reporting teams that build and all these dashboards and no one's using them, right? You know, it's like it's been exported back to
That's
Excel,
a really good
right?
point.
You know,
and
we're accumulating
I'm seeing that.
Yeah, we're accumulating a lot of data debt. You know, like as in these dashboards just sit
Excel
there.
is still coming like the Bible.
Yeah, for sure. So
honestly,
so if you think about tech stack as well, like, and this is for someone, you know, trying to break into the space, I think having Excel wasn't going anywhere.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's really not.
Yeah, people say, you know.
In fact, let's talk about this now. Let's shift the conversation to that question directly. How do you break into that space now? Let's talk about the tech career.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've seen the journey yourself, man. Like you've sat in that seat, right? You don't necessarily, contrary to popular beliefs, you don't need a computer science degree to kind of like break in. Right?
And it's not linear, by the way.
Exactly.
It's not. It's not.
It's not. And I think, from my experience, like I've seen folks come in from, you know, finance, you know, supply chains, procurement, arts, you know, journalism's a big one. So the London Tableau User Group, where I'm fortunate enough to be, you know, one of the leadership team, we went to The Economist. We had an event at Economist last year, November, and like data journalism, you know, was a thing, right? And you had individuals who had a very strong background with like, you know, literature, and they're sort of marrying that with data, right? So you don't have to necessarily be, you know, a math major, econ. I studied econ. You know, for me, like I went to university not kind of like knowing what I wanted to do, but econ again so broad. At one point, I was actually going to go down the policy sort of making route.
Oh wow,
policy setting route. You know,
yeah.
I had a sort of passion for like, you know, macroeconomics and things of that nature.
Wow.
But eventually I went down this lane. So I think for people looking to get into the field, be comfortable with like things like statistics, right? You know, I think you need to a bunch of like courses online, right? You know, like it's almost like have a clear idea of what you want to do with data. It's such a broad field, you know, like when I first started, and you know, you feel like you're stumbling in the dark, you know, a lot of the time, right? So I was like, okay, you know, I'm gonna learn sort of Python. Why? Because I heard someone say Python, like, you know, I didn't know much about the programming language, but I was like, you know, it's data, I'm gonna learn Python. But then as I continued to, you know, venture down that avenue, I realized, man, there are so many lanes you can go down. Python, you can go down, you know, the data science route, which is what I sort of gone down, more like predict and so on, like machine learning and things like that. You can go down the sort of iOS web development route as well, right? You know, overlay things like HTML, CSS and become like a developer. Funny enough, I was doing courses on that, don't ask me why. Or you can even go down the hacking route, you know, it could be like an ethical hacker. And so I think it's first of all, I would suggest like having a clear understanding of like what, you know, first of all, like what you think your strengths are, you know, what, because to be successful, you have to have a general curiosity about it. You can't just get into the field saying, okay, I'm going to make a ton of money. It's like, you know, it's one, there's no sort of honor in that. You've got to like have that inquisitive nature about you. You know, you want to lean into something that, you know, sparks that interest, you know, so because that's going to be a driving force throughout your career. You're always going to be learning. Like the space, the industry, forever changing. You know, you got like funny, like my mentor Sarah Bartlett. I think she used the analogy from like Alice in Wonderland. Like the data spaces, it's such that you need to run as fast as you can to stay in the same place.
Wow.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so I think certainly like having inquisitive mind helps. And then once you've sort of established that, you can then figure out what tools are sort of needed. For me, like, and such as yourself, I started off as a, as a data analyst. So core tech stacks, you know, Excel, you know, that's, you know, basis, you know, it's widely used, like billions of users, right? In every area of the business as well. Like, and I think a lot of it is generational as well, you know, like I think it's a Gen X or boomers, you know, they started off, you know, with, not so much boomers, I don't know, but they started off using kind of like Excel. And so it's still quite ingrained in their sort of culture and how they interact with sort of data. So I don't think it's going anywhere. And if you think about some of the developments that Excel have made over the years, you know, now you can integrate Python into Excel now. Yeah, like it's really, really powerful. It's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
It's a powerful tool. So I think as a basis, like having a strong grasp on that is really important. Some kind of data management tool, so SQL, and then you can go through like PostgreSQL, you know, NoSQL, no code. Like there's so many different forms of like data management, but I think certainly having understanding of an ID you can sort of code out of and you know, aggregate data, you know, do all sorts with it. And then finally, I like to recommend a visualization tool, and that can be like whatever you want, right? So I went with Tableau. No reason other than like I took a course on Udemy from, I'm not shouting out, like Super Data Science. But I'm taking a course, and again, this is when I was sort of transitioning, trying to sort of figure out what it is I want to do, and Tableau was like this tool of choice. I learned it, and then it's like this rabbit hole. I sort of learned the tool, and then I've, you know, found a community. That's huge. Like, is in terms of like, so you've got your stack, right? Then you start to, you know, find community. There's going to be other users out there, right? You can kind of like share resources. Like in most cases, it's already been done.
Yeah.
Right.
So you said a couple of points there which I find interesting. So I guess initially I saw myself as a analyst, data analyst.
Yeah.
But I think the most important skill is more how you actually think. I'm not an analyst, a data analyst. I am a problem solver.
Yeah, I love that.
solve
Love
problems.
That.
That's just what I do.
Huge. That's what it is. Gamify it. It's one big game.
And the way that I see it is your stack is maybe whatever tools the business has available or that you prefer, which you're comfortable with, right? And this is something that you said to me, and I think I might have mentioned this even in a LinkedIn post that I did recently. You said to me that it doesn't matter about what tool that you use, whether it be, reporting tool, Click, Power BI, or Tableau. The most important thing is having the flexibility to use whichever tool, because they all have their different strengths, but most importantly, knowing what you want to do. And from there, you can always reverse engineer, right? So that's something that I really took from you.
Absolutely.
Which is, I'm sure we'll touch on in a moment, which is why I was very keen to go to your, the London Tableau Group.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure that we'll touch on, because I wanted to take from it inspiration on different ideas on how I could take my dashboarding to the next level, which I certainly did when I, see people taking still images and bringing this to life as an actual visual was mind blowing to me, and seeing the way that they did it, like manually encoding it, then using multiple layers. Wow, top drawer. That's and powerful. I thought to myself, at some point, I really need to learn how to do that. Right. I also think that personally, it's changed. I think that a lot of the roles overlap. So if the role is you're a, reporting and MI analyst or a data analyst, but to do your job now, you probably might need to learn a little bit of back-end stuff. So when we talk about back-end, we're talking about the whole transformation process. So when you get data, maybe it might be a CSV file or a JSON file, and Shola touched on there that you need to clean the data. The data needs to be brought up to a standard where you can actually, it's usable. So that process in itself called ETL is mainly what data engineers do. And I feel like having appreciation for that is important. So maybe you need to learn a little bit of modeling. So I'm dipping my toes into the back end and that data engineering, but not too much. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I feel like they all overlap, intertwine. Now we spoke about, well, maybe you need to do some predictive analysis, forecasting. So maybe actually we need to learn some machine learning skills potentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's massively changed since the past, few years that I've been in industry.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not linear.
Honestly, you coded it like so well just now. I think exactly that. Like I touched on like having that sort of broad range, that tech stack, Excel, SQL, Tableau, whatever you want to do. And it's recognizing that those visualizations, and you see on LinkedIn, what's better, like Tableau or Power BI. You use both. You want to be tool agnostic, right? You want to see them as vehicles towards insight, and it's almost like deploying, like knowing when to deploy which one. Like for me, Tableau, quickfire analysis, I can, if I want to, look at like a quick linear trend or categorize data very quickly and do some analysis, I'll go over Tableau. If I want to build some standard reporting, I'll opt for Power BI. It's a bit more robust. A lot of the chart choices are quite like standardized, and so I think it's understanding that ultimately like these tools are just that, tools and vehicles towards insights. And on that sort of topic of like stacks, like you mentioned again, like soft skills as well, right? That's huge. There's problem solving is one, but storytelling is another, and we'll sort of talk about that. But ultimately, the individuals who I've come across in my sort of journey who have been really, really valuable at an organization are those who have the dexterity to communicate across multiple business competencies, like you just identified. So you have individuals who, like you said, they're not engineers per se, but they can have conversations with engineers. I want a data type in this format. This is the cadence I want. Remove all these redundant rows. but ultimately they can, go to stakeholders and senior leadership and like distill the information very succinctly and concise. It's like the managing director of, I don't know, like they don't care about, the back end or how long it took. It's like, why are sales going down? What are we going to do? Right. So like people who've been really successful, they know, how to navigate that landscape really, really well. So I think soft skills and, that ability to, communicate is so important. Gone are the days, you have analysts, tucked away in a dark room with their headphones in, coding away. No, you've got to be able to talk, and I think that's a really understated skill that's not talked about enough.
So you're a likable guy, No,
I wouldn't say all
you're
of that.
You're a likable guy.
I wouldn't say all of that.
Nice smile, still got hair.
Let's go.
Still doing up earrings, loops and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
Shout
you've built your community, or you're part of the community, the London Tableau Group.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to be invited by you to one of your events very recently, which I thought was fantastic. And I spoke about there how it benefited me. So that must be about building a community, having soft skills. Tell us a little bit more about this, what it's about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Please.
Thanks for like coming down to that. Like, speaking to Sarah Bartlett, who's one of like OG, like amazing, like phenomenal thinker in this sort of space of data, and just like a wonderful person in general. So she's been sort of spearheading the group. I joined a user group, a London Tableau User Group, January last year. So a little over a year now.
Why did you join the group?
I was coerced into joining it. I was like, held a gun for it. No, like it was. So prior to that, I'd been involved in like the data. Like there's a community in Tableau, right? Called like the Data Fam, and they're quite popular on like Twitter or X, like now, whatever it's called. And there are loads of initiatives that essentially encourage newcomers or individuals who are looking to break into Tableau or data to take part in like challenges like Makeover Monday, where you're given, I think Irene talked about that, right? So you're given like an arbitrary data set on many, I don't know, like it could be like politics, military spending. It's such a wonderful initiative because it gives you exposure to a whole breadth of different industries, data sets, and you're kind of like tasked to build a visualization on the back of that, right? Anything, and then you can get like feedback, you can submit it for like awards and things. It's like wonderful. So I got involved in that community, and as on that journey, there are like various user groups across the world. You can have like healthcare analytics user group. There's user groups that are centered around education, higher ed, whatever it may be. There's a user group, and so London user group. Grew up in South London, and that was the first user group I attended. So I think it was in Salesforce Tower, and I just grew like. I was incredibly moved by the speakers, and I wanted to. It's just we talk about trying to we are from a certain demographic and trying to be an inspiration by representation in the space as well. So for me, joining the user group was. How can I pull more people that won't typically have exposure to this? That look like me. We grew up in the kids in South London that typically won't have exposure to this side. Right? It's nice. It's nice. You've seen what it's like. So that was a driving force for me. I think London, huge catchment area where you have like really really like talented individuals, right? So again, it's we try to meet once a quarter, like bi-monthly. I don't know if we can sort of coin that.
Sure.
And then we, share best practices. We have speakers come in and talk about some of like use cases, not just Tableau, but how they're integrating like AI platform into just their wider data ecosystem. I think the last tug you weren't at it, but we had Pablo, who was a former leader, take us through this API he built on ChatGPT, and he was able to generate color palettes.
Wow.
Like it was phenomenal. Like as in, and it really just kind of, you only know what you know.
This is why
you
really
only know
like,
what you know,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
So it's like, for me, seeing that, it's almost like expanding the window of like what's like possible. It's like, oh my God, like we can, like, actually I've been having this problem at work. Someone solved it, someone's, the blueprint's there, so I think it is that exposure. And for me, I've always had an inquisitive mind, I'm always like curious, I want to learn. So there is that element as well. But yeah, it's a wonderful group. Shout out to, Sarah Bartlett, Mo, Alina, Zainab, all like phenomenal individuals in their own right who have been, established as, Tableau featured authors, Tableau ambassadors. I like to joke with Zainab and say she's like a poster girl. If you go, you met Zainab.
Yeah, she's awesome.
So highly fashionable as well. You talk about my earrings, but we try to inject a bit of personality. But ultimately, it's a case of like bringing in really like great ideas, great minds to kind of like culminate in this like kind of resource sharing base.
And where can people find information on the group and your next event?
Yeah.
And is it tailored for people from, novices to maybe aspiring graduates to people who are looking for a role? Can you just shed some light on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's welcome. Our doors open, like everyone. We've had, company leaders come in. We have hiring managers come into those events. So that's a great way to get hired as well. So nice. For students like, all recent grads trying to, get into the space and land their first role, we have, companies and hiring managers come in specifically to source like, Tableau professionals or like data professionals at those events, right? So it's a great sort of place for that. So again, just a mix of people, and people just want, like, some people just come for the free pizza. We have free pizzas and drinks as well.
That helps.
Yeah,
that helps. Cost of living crisis.
Yeah,
and all that jazz.
right. You know that. Done now. But yeah, there's it's just such a. We try to build a cohesive culture, right? Where, it's all about, idea sharing, best practice, but ultimately, like, we're all in this journey to learn and grow, and I think we are the biggest user group in the world. I don't know if
Amazing.
Yeah. So we just want to continue to create a space for people to kind of like foster that learning, and I think it's challenging, but I think we're doing a good job, and I'm incredibly proud to sort of be a part of it.
Brilliant. I'm going to go a little bit deeper now.
Yeah, go on.
So you spoke about, if you like, where we're from, South London, massive pool of talent.
Yeah.
But probably comes with its challenges.
Yeah.
For people from certain demographics, right? Maybe from background, maybe disadvantaged, maybe there are things happening at home.
Yeah.
So how important was having they might not have known you then, but having a mentor like Sarah to help you to grow into the leader that you are now and man that you are, and what can we do as young black men, which I think I'm okay to say, to help guide some of these, the next generation into these kind of spaces, make data, make leadership cool, as opposed to maybe making lifestyle and some of the other kind of work that they think is cool, just like sports and music. How can we help to turn the narrative? And I say that because I recently there was a statistic that I saw published. And
can we flash it on the screen? Is that something we can do? Like,
yeah,
flash it on the screen?
We can.
Yeah,
Animations. Unfortunately, Black African kids came about 5th or 6th. Black Caribbeans came third from bottom. The only 2 groups of people that were below them were from communities that were known to be, or people associate with being illiterate, such as the gypsies. Just what I know there's a lot there. I just spoke about a lot there, but
it's
I feel like we should touch on this.
It's very like I think this is a sort of perfect time for me to kind of like drop in like sort of peer power. So the non-profit organization my wife works for, I've been fortunate enough to partner with them for the last few months to a year. Essentially, it's a education non-profit based out in the Mid-South in Memphis, Tennessee predominantly. And it's a phenomenal model where senior high school students and university, like freshman and sophomore, are paired with schools, right? And they offer high dose tutoring to just inner city school kids, like it's kids that have some of these challenges we talked about, like truancy, falling graduation rates, dropout rates, in a bit to kind of like placate them almost, and sort of stop that churn that would ultimately cascade to that sort of wealth disparity, lack of career opportunities and so on and so forth. So shout out Courtney as well, like such a progressive CEO, very forward thinking, high energy. I don't think we talked about it, but in that, I'm sort of jumping in topics here, but someone who having a leader that buys in towards creating a cohesive data culture, huge. Like that's like ultimately that's what it is. Someone who is invested. They recognize the impact that data will have on their organization, on their team, right, and ultimately on the work they do. So he's been like sort of incredibly supportive in terms of like building out that infrastructure, upskilling the team, giving us resources to be able to kind of like build like a end-to-end cloud solution. Like it's really, really good. And again, this ties back to the kids, right, the students, right, who without like the support, fall into like we've grown up, gang violence, like and so on. And I think having that kind of like symbiotic like mentor relationships, like it's so important. And I've been fortunate enough to have like really, really good mentors over the years. Sarah Bartlett being one. And again, there's a quote that sort of sticks out to me as like, not saying like you make a lot of mistakes, Sarah, but like, learn from the mistakes of others because you're not going to leave.
What does mentorship look like? How do these, like, what does it look like?
It's a case of, for me, identifying where I want to be. What does my career trajectory look like, right? Like almost I bought like a role or whatever that may be, like at a distance, maybe like, 5, 6, 10 years away from it. But then working with someone who's walked that path and both of you are sort of co-creating the solution to allow you to kind of show up every day, make these incremental improvements and ultimately get to that direction. And that's not just professionally. It's like you can get like life mentors and so on that sort of, build you.
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think you it's not just rooted in like your professional development. Like ultimately it's like, how do you manage your finance? You might have like, a mentor for that, your physical health is one, your relationships might be another, so I think it's, and it's not the same person. I advise like seeking experts in in whatever lane you want to sort of focus on, and not doing too much. You can only work. I think we're on an illusion that, you know, our energy is like infinite. It's fine. You know, God, you know, be deliberate with where you want to kind of like, you know, focus your attention and energy. And I think the right mentor can really accelerate a lot of things for you in your life. You know, I think I've been fortunate enough to have Sarah in particular. Like, you know, we meet like coffee store.
Sure.
And she kind of like, I'm like, hey, you know, I want to be, I don't know, like a, you know, corporate group strategy director in like 5 years or something like that, right? That's like my goal. Like, and she's like, you know, are you doing the right things? You know, does your LinkedIn profile communicate that? You know, if not, make these changes, right? You know, what sort of content are you sort of pushing out there? You know, so we talked about the idea of inbound and outbound, and like, so a mentor kind of like shapes how, you know, what you're projecting out there, what sort of perception you're like projecting out there, so you can find people and people can sort of find you. And it's just conversations around that sort of element, like personal branding, and so on and so forth. You know,
You've given me two ideas that I want to talk about now because of what you just said. When you talk about mentorship and I guess the circle, of course, we grew up with
networking events as well.
Networking events.
I keep forgetting. So that's one more point. I think putting you in the right rooms. Right? Like put, you know, like it's like huge. I think I wouldn't have been. I don't think I would have been part of the London Tableau User Group without Sarah. So it's not only you know, not only like showing you the door. And I've got a shout out to a mate of mine, Amor as well, Amor Soa. Like he's been a like phenomenal mentor. When I initially first got in the space, he would take time and essentially just like coach me and he would always say, I'll not only show you the door, but I'll also tell you what to do when you're in the room as well. You know, so it's quite cool. So shout out Amor.
I'm well aware that you've got a great circle of close friends, and you know, I know them. They're my friends too,
as well.
And you know, people that I grew up with, people like Paul Logan and Jonathan Alori and Javari Cameron, Tremaine, the Brotherhood. You strike
all
me,
phenomenal athletes, man.
Yeah, phenomenal athletes. You strike me as someone who wears your heart on your sleeve. What you see is what you get. You love hard, but you also feel. Yeah. And you've had a great synopsis. You've had some good days. You've had some dark days. Yeah. How has that brotherhood, and I'm going to touch on it, helped? Huge. As a mentorship group?
Yeah. Huge. I think... That's a deep one, man.
I know.
That's a deep one. Like, as in, it's that shared story, right? You know, like, it's way easier to go further together than it is alone, right? If you want to go fast, go alone, right? Collectively, that circle you mentioned, you know, all earned scholarships to go to America, right? We're all part of the same training group. I mean, you were there, like at Triple A's, like you guys would come like top 5, 1 to 5, and there is that sort of, not to say that you use your friends as barometers to sort of gauge how well you're doing, but you uplift each other as well, right? You know, there is that kind of like, you know, this is the standard we hold ourselves to.
Because ultimately, this journey that you're on, that we're walking, not everyone can walk it. Yeah. So it's actually really quite lonely, to be honest.
It is.
And
it is.
Very few people will understand it.
Many are called, few are chosen.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
amen.
Like, as in, it's daunting sometimes. It's very daunting. I think, you know, leaning into that uncertainty as well. Like, I think for me, I've adjusted my lens and how I sort of plan. I'm very goal orientated. I've got a lot of drive, but I'd rather think 3 steps ahead as opposed to 12, right? And over the years, and you've seen like, you know, people, you know, come in and out. I understand, and I think we've got this collective drive. There's this big picture, like there's always have that in the focus, right? But understand there's a multitude of ways to get there, right? You know, and you know, seeing the path that, you know, we've all taken to, you know, land where we are. It's inspiring. I think it becomes
really
the blueprint for the next generation as well, right? It's almost like I go through certain situations now, and I might encounter, you know, a young guy or girl who's going through something identical. It's like, and then for me, it's like, I've, you know, this looks familiar. I've been there. I've done that. This is how you do it. And there are certain things that you mentioned going alone. Especially in the data, like in a world of like sort of data is lonely, you know, you're like,
life's
yeah,
lonely,
mate, when you're doing like these like training workshops and you're just like doing hours, like with no like clear, you're just working. There is no like reward at the end of it. You just know like, I know I need to make this decision. I know I need to invest this time. I don't even know if it's going to pay off, but I know I need to do this in a better of me. It can be scary, right? You know, but I feel like you do yourself a disservice of like, you know, not skipping that. You can't, you have to go through it sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Because if you don't have what the like, it's a character building, right? You go through that lane, like as in, and I've seen that same sort of journey in everyone, like you sort of called out, right? That sort of character, like, you know, if you don't have what the process creates, you're not going to keep it anyway, you know what I'm saying? So things like data, things like, you know, I think like Jonathan's a strategist, or like someone like Paul works in like, you know, corporate banking. It's like
we've got minerals.
They've
Minerals.
exactly, you know what I'm saying? So and I think it's just like just it's good to see black boys win, you know what I'm saying? Like so
personal branding.
Yeah. Important.
Very important. Now,
what would you say your personal brand is, like roughly? Like, as in,
I'm sexy.
Like, yeah, you're right. No, 100%. I hear that, man.
No,
I hear it, man. You got that charisma, very charismatic.
Yeah, exactly that, and that's how I try to brand myself, pitch myself. I think that social media is an extremely powerful tool. I know
if leveraged properly.
Absolutely. I know there's a lot of negative connotations around it, but I think if you use it correctly, you can make the right noise, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I've very much made a conscious effort to kind of integrate the different pillars of my life, which I feel are important, such as, you know, data, and also, you know, wellness. As you know, I'm a physiotherapist. I practice all the time. I still practice and have a business which I enjoy, and I enjoy data too. But I think I've made it my priority to try. I think when you go online, there's 2 things really that you can do. You can either educate people on something, or to teach. And how you build a very consistent, a good brand is by making sure that you have good, clean, consistent content.
Yeah.
And then I think it's important, like you said, to go to events and to network and talk to people. And also, people just have to like you. You know, some people are just not likable.
Yeah.
They're just a bit of a dickhead.
Yeah, I don't, but it works. It works for them though. Like, as in, like sometimes, you know, I think there is that sort of James. Is it James Smith? I think he's like a PT who like bashes other PTs or something like that.
Yeah,
and
there's a few.
He's cultivated quite a following.
Well, controversy always sells.
Yeah,
we know that.
Yeah. It's
you know?
I think,
but just to add to this point, I've seen people that don't do that in that kind of fitness space.
Yeah.
Actually, the man behind the camera doesn't do that. That's a guy called Brian, Wolf Studio.
Shout out Brian.
They're doing big things.
Man, it's phenomenal.
And we need to talk about our boy Ash. Ash the Can Man, I think his
Ash
name is
the
on
Can
Instagram.
Man, shout out,
I'm
yeah.
definitely going to make sure that gets put up on here too.
Yeah.
He's built a really fantastic fitness brand as well. We've got other friend Lee as well. So I've seen people in spaces do it
Shout out
without
Ash.
doing controversy. So please.
I think, no, you said it really well. I think visibility is important. It's like everything, you know. It's like getting your name out there, like for the right reasons as well. But also having a clear message. You know, like as in, you don't want to be choppy with, you know. You can diversify. You can like, and you're more of an expert in this than I am in terms of like sort of content creation and so on. I have like my kickboxing stuff, but it's almost like know your audience. Right, know your audience. Like, have a clear sort of idea of what your audience. Because the last thing you want is trying to target everyone. I'm guessing, like with I'm talking like specific with data. So if you're like on LinkedIn and it's like, you know, data visualization is your thing, go crazy. If it's data strategy your thing, go crazy. If it's AI implementation, like press on that lane. Right, you'll find the right people. You don't want to, you know, be in a position where you're trying to speak to everyone, because you inevitably end up speaking to no one, right? You know, so I think there is that element. It's like, be on message, and you can, you know, vary your degree of content. You can do some like, again, I'm not a content creator, but you can like vary how you know, deploy that message, but as long as it's on message. And I think ultimately, personal brand, like networking events as well, right? As trite and banal as it may sound, like you need to be in certain rooms, right? You know, you need to, you know, and this is what Sarah sort of pushed me to, like do more speaker series, you know, talk about like this is completely new for me, you know, sitting behind the camera. But again, like it's been such a, you know, eye-open experience, and like I've got like a newfound appreciation for like everything that goes in, like into it. It's amazing, like, and also just like how you like facilitate and conduct as well. So yes. There's that sort of component in there as well. So I think being on message, increasing your visibility through like sort of networking and so on certainly helps as well. Yeah, and just ultimately like you. One thing I've realized is, again, talking about soft skills, like you talk about being likable, right? EQ, having like just high conscientious trait, you know, or high degree of emotional intelligence as well. So ultimately, you need to be able to get people into like your way of thinking, not in like a Machiavellian way, but almost like, you know, you need to get people to buy in, right? You know, you're in certain rooms, you're trying to campaign, okay, we need this infrastructure, it's going to cost 100 grand, why? You know, you need to be able to position yourself as, you know, transparent, credible, right? And these are traits that, you know, don't come intuitive. I work on it like every day. Like I'm certainly not the most like polished individual, but again, it's something that I try to, you know, sort of like work on, because I just know how important it is to kind of like, you know, move things, you know, over the line, you know.
Move the needle, amazing.
Yeah, for sure. So.
Brilliant stuff. We're gonna draw things to a close, because me and you could talk forever. So we will most likely do a part 2. But what does the next steps look like for Shola?
For me, oh man, that's a I don't know. I've got like a list of stuff. Like some stuff I can share, you know, some stuff are like quite closeted, and I like to sort of protect my kind of like goals and aspirations. I think immediately getting something to eat. I'm starving.
I hear you.
No, I think for me, like I've made this, I wouldn't say it's a transition, but I've sort of taken steps to be a bit more commercial and strategic in my, like, are we talking professional like steps? Yeah. So I think I've made steps to be a bit more sort of commercial in my thinking. So not so much using like like sort of doing like data analysis, predictive models. It's like, you know, how can I be, you know, I don't want to say like subject matter expert, but like, how can I be a trusted advisor in that sense, right? You know, like what are the traits I need, you know, both soft skills, technical skills, you know, be able to kind of like, you know, communicate, you know, effective strategies, like deploy resources a bit more efficiently, right? So I think for me, it's like sharpening those areas up for me, like, and again, that would be a case of like immersing myself in like, you know, learning programs, you know, taking on, like, I don't know, client handling school with something like my organization offers. So like put my name forward for opportunities like that. And continue to just, you know, lean into like uncomfortable situations as well. You know, I say it time and time again, I'm in an odd season of unbalance right now. Right. So where I feel like I'm over indexed and leveraging myself in more than I think I can handle. But I think for me, where I'm at in my life, it's necessary. It won't be forever, but I know that in order for me to accelerate certain things, I need to go through seasons, right? I need to go through like moments like this. So, yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. And I think ultimately, it will just be continue to kind of like show up and have fun on some going about it, you know?
Brilliant. Where can people find you?
I'm the big show. Nah. So social media, like I do have like sort of Twitter and so on, but I think LinkedIn, from like a professional standpoint, I try to be active enough. Like Sarah like grills me about posting on there. So LinkedIn, just I write my full name, Olushola Olojo.
Nice. We'll get those put up for you.
Yeah, Olushola Olojo on LinkedIn. Instagram, the big show,
the K1 fighter. We didn't even touch on that, but next time.
Getting there. Funny shout out Yannick as well. So he gave me that nickname.
Love it.
The big show. Back in Memphis, and it's just sort of stuck, you know. So just Instagram and sort of LinkedIn, we can connect. And London Tableau User Group, we've got our next event at Virgin Media O2, May 28th. It's going to be all stars.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really good. So yeah, make sure you kind of attend and support and get some pizza.
Nice. Fantastic conversation.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyed getting to know Shola, the data lead, the strategist, but also the man. And to sit down with you is on a humane level.
Man, you're too kind, man.
We've not seen you on the speaker circuit yet, but I'm pretty sure that after this will definitely kickstart this next phase, and I'm sure you'll discuss this with your mentor. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your weekend. This gentleman has traveled all the way from Hampshire to be here tonight to share his thoughts with you guys, so you better appreciate him.
I really appreciate you having me down, man.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my man. Cool.
I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, and until the next time, see you guys soon.